Something big is brewing behind closed doors in Ottawa and Washington, and almost no one is talking about it publicly. But the few whispers that have leaked out paint a picture of a deal so secret, so quietly negotiated, that even members of Parliament are reportedly being kept in the dark. And at the center of it all, Prime Minister Mark Carney and President Donald Trump. What started as routine trade discussions may now be morphing into something far larger, something that could reshape Canada's economic sovereignty for decades. Because according to multiple sources close to the negotiations, Canada might already be walking into a trap. For months, Ottawa has been playing defense. The U.S. slapped tariffs left and right on metals, autos, lumber, claiming national security concerns. Carney's government promised Canadians it would fight back, defend jobs, and stand firm. But behind the scenes, something shifted. Reports began surfacing in mid-September that Canadian officials were suddenly making frequent, unannounced trips to Washington. Meetings stretched late into the night. Flights between Ottawa and D.C. were quietly rescheduled, and senior advisors were told to keep their phones off the record. Then, last week, a leak. A senior trade insider claimed Canada and the U.S. were discussing a sectoral tariff deal, a selective arrangement that could exempt some industries while tightening restrictions on others. But here's the catch. No one knows the full terms. And now, Prime Minister Carney himself has confirmed the rumors, but in a way that's raising even more questions than answers. When asked by CTV News' Judy Trin whether Canadians could expect a deal by the time world leaders gather at APEC in South Korea, Carney didn't deny it. He didn't downplay it. He simply said, "We'll see. We're in ongoing discussions with the Americans. I wouldn't overplay it. I wouldn't overplay it." A cautious, almost evasive line, the kind politicians use when they're walking on very thin ice. But government sources speaking off record tell a different story. They say the Prime Minister's team is hoping for movement within days, possibly before he even boards the plane to Asia. And the key issue on the table? It's not just about trade anymore. It's about control. According to one insider, and we cannot independently verify this claim, the U.S. is reportedly offering Canada a limited exemption from future tariff hikes. Sounds good, right? Except for one shocking condition. Canada would have to prioritize American imports in several critical industries for the next 5 years. In other words, a trade-off disguised as a victory. Imagine Canada celebrating tariff relief on the surface while quietly agreeing to reroute supply chains and purchasing decisions to benefit American producers first. That's the kind of clause that could hollow out Canadian manufacturing from the inside. And that's why critics are calling it what it appears to be, a trade trap. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind. When the U.S. first escalated tariffs earlier this year, Canada's response was firm. Carney insisted Canada wouldn't play by America's game. Ottawa retaliated with its own tariffs and pledged to seek allies abroad, in Europe, in Asia, and even in Africa. But by August, that strategy began to falter. Exports dipped. Domestic industries started feeling the squeeze. And business leaders began quietly urging the government to find a way out, even if it meant a compromise. Trump, ever the dealmaker, seized the moment. He told reporters in June, "Canada's a great partner. We just want a fair deal." Maybe Mark's the guy who can finally get it done. Many dismissed that as typical Trump bravado. But now, it sounds more like a signal that the U.S. already had Canada exactly where it wanted. Fast forward to this week. Ottawa sources say the federal government has missed 2 internal deadlines for reaching a deal. Now, a third, and potentially final, round is underway. Dominic LeBlanc, Canada's trade minister, admits progress is being made but refuses to set any deadline. "We're into a level of detail we hadn't seen previously," he said. "But we still have work to do." That sounds diplomatic. But between the lines, it's clear the deal is close. And what's most concerning isn't the timeline. It's the secrecy. No public consultation. No parliamentary debate. Not even a full briefing to the provincial premiers who stand to lose billions if Ottawa caves to Washington's conditions. As one analyst told us off camera, if this deal goes through the way it's being discussed, Canada could effectively surrender a chunk of its trade sovereignty to the United States. But there's more. Sources in Washington claim President Trump sees this deal not just as an economic win, but as a political weapon. Heading into next year's U.S. election cycle, a Canadian victory could be marketed to American voters as proof that Trump forced another country to bend. And in exchange, Carney could tout it at home as a strategic partnership, even if it quietly ties Canada closer to Washington's economic orbit. It's a narrative that works for both leaders, but not necessarily for Canadians. Tone becomes investigative and bold. And here's the question everyone's afraid to ask. Did Canada actually agree to more than tariffs? Because a classified briefing document obtained by CTV last week, since pulled offline, allegedly referenced coordinated industrial alignment between Ottawa and Washington. That phrase might sound harmless, but experts say it could mean aligning regulatory frameworks, price controls, and even national procurement priorities with U.S. policy. In plain English, Canada could lose its freedom to choose who it buys from, how it builds, and what it exports. That's not just a trade adjustment. That's economic integration by stealth. Prime Minister Carney says Canada's goal is diversification, to expand trade with Asia, not rely on America. He's set to meet with ASEAN leaders in Malaysia next week, and then head to South Korea for APEC. But the irony is striking. While he travels east to discuss diversification, Canada may already be signing a deal that locks it back into dependency on Washington. That's why some insiders are calling it the silent surrender. And while the public sees Carney smiling for cameras abroad, many in Ottawa are reportedly bracing for backlash once the fine print becomes public. If the rumors are true, this could be one of the most consequential trade shifts in modern Canadian history. So, here's where we stand tonight. The Prime Minister confirms the talks. Sources say a deal could be struck within days. The White House, predictably, is staying silent. And Canadians? They're being told only to wait and see. But in politics, wait and see often means the decision's already been made. So the real question now, one every Canadian deserves to ask, is this. Did Mark Carney just save Canada's economy? Or did he hand it over, piece by piece, to Donald Trump? Because if this so-called sectoral deal becomes law, it won't just decide the price of steel or lumber. It could redefine the balance of power between Ottawa and Washington for an entire generation. And when that happens, we may finally learn whether this was a masterstroke of diplomacy or a trade trap Canada walked right into. This story is still developing. But one thing is certain. The next few days could decide whether Canada stands as an independent trading nation or becomes America's newest economic satellite.